There is a small rainforest that straddles the Tanzania-Uganda border that teems with colobus monkeys. Boston and I spent 2 days hacking our way through the vines until eventually we discovered tracks made by illegal loggers and were able to make steadier progress north. At Mutukula, we made the official crossing. According to Boston, now that we were in Uganda, we would see civilization flourish, but for the first day there was only more impenetrable forest. It wasn't until we banked back east to rejoin the course of the river that we would come across our first town, and I would see if Boston's bold claims were true. A few kilometers north of where the river meets the shore of Lake Victoria sits the fishing village of Casansero. The phrase has connotations of a small, idyllic community with a long-established way of life, but Casansero was more properly known as a landing site, a warren of houses and industry that had sprung up for workers to take maximum advantage of the lake. Like other landing sites along the shores of the lake, Casansero had been founded to harvest the famous Nile perch that flourish in the lake. In the 1950s, when Uganda was still a British colony, the prevailing view had been that Lake Victoria was an underexploited resource that could feed great swathes of East Africa, and the Nile perch had been introduced to the lake to create a new fishing industry. Places like Casansero appeared all along the shore. People flocked to the lake to build businesses, and a new economy began to boom. But though Uganda's local population benefited, the introduction of the invasive fish was an environmental disaster. The Nile perch are brutal predators. With no natural controls on their numbers, they colonized the lake with astonishing speed, condemning other species to extinction. As the shanties closed in around us, great crowds began to throng the streets. Our arrival had been heralded by an article in the Ugandan press written by a photographer and freelance journalist named Matthias Mugisha. The piece in New Vision magazine had announced to Uganda's literary classes that a white man was daring to walk the length of the Nile, and crowds of fishermen, drunk from bags of cheap waragi gin, lined the streets to welcome us. One vociferous rascal even had a microphone and announced our arrival to the eager mob. Off to the side of the first street, African rap blared out of big black speakers sitting outside a barber shop where a badly drawn sign advertised a trendy mullet cut. Half of the population seemed to be wearing red and white Arsenal football shirts, the other half whatever ill-fitting garments had come over from Europe on the last charity delivery. "But how do they all know?" I asked, as Boston and I were subsumed by the crowd. Surely these fishermen weren't the types to read Uganda's literary magazines. "This lot don't read," Boston confirmed, "not unless it's the Red Pepper, full of scandal and whatnot. They wouldn't be interested in our trip unless you'd been terrorizing young boys like those corrupt pastors they have here." At that moment, a man emerged from the crowd, wearing a guilty grin. I could tell instantly that he wasn't one of Casansero's fishermen. "How do you enjoy your welcome to Uganda, Mr. Tembula?" "Matthias," Boston began, "it's madness." I looked sidelong at Boston. Despite his protestations, the fact was he seemed to be enjoying being the hero of the day. Tembula means to walk in the Ugandan language, and that is what Matthias had called me in his article, the White Walker. Now, as we followed him deeper into Casansero's dense streets, that was what the crowd relentlessly cheered. One of them tried to force a bag of the cheap gin into my hands, but most were keeping it for themselves. Even the workers about to depart for their night fishing were still having a few for the road. Being a Ugandan, and as a journalist prone to a bit of play acting, Matthias took my hand and led me towards the shore of the lake.